can help in any way.
People he still knows, right?
Okay, there should be another person from the tribal branch coming to help, but if not, then I might
Well, you know, I always
for that.
say Campus Goal is
Cool.
we hire all the old
That mic is on.
because we have great stores still working for us.
If you want to turn it off at some point. No, it's on.
We do well. We're already on it. Yeah.
And Chris, he's the starter.
And so when he comes out and that's all.
Yeah.
All that sort of stuff.
Or that you guys will develop like who's gonna get around us.
Does allow seepage. And even Sean Bush was one who recommended, like, maybe you guys, before he retired, we were gonna work to talk about maybe changing that to allow that.
Honestly, I wasn't aware of that. All I can remember is I go and picture it. I remember, a couple of
Oops, sorry.
and I always remember that one.
Hello. I think we're going to start on the next presentation.
All right, let's keep going.
Hi, good afternoon. This is the next presentation from the Indian Health Service, Sanitation Facilities Construction Branch, or the SFC. And it's a brief overview of assistance for water, wastewater, and solid waste projects. And I'm Chris Brady with IHS, and I'm here with
My name is Mark Hench.
Luke Schulte. And I'm going to go through the first few slides, and then we'll transition over to Mark, and after that over to Luke. And there's some pictures kind of in between our parts, so we figure those are kind of good times. We could take like a short break, see if there's any kind of questions, and then we can go on to the next part. Let's see here. There we go. So we're going to touch on these very, very briefly, just to give some introduction. First of all, for our IHS SFC program is our authorities and our mission. Then we're going to go over funding from IHS SFC program. That's just an introduction. And the main part of the presentation will be Mark, and he's going to cover the SDS system, how to get projects or needs onto the SDS list, and then how to have them compete for funding. And then on part 4, Luke is going to touch on, once they are funded, what do we do after that in terms of the design and the construction. So just some brief overviews on that. And what we hope to achieve, once again, it's a very brief presentation, but what we hope to achieve just a better understanding, first of all, of our program, of our funding, and primarily of the SDS system, because that is one of the main components of our program is SDS. So first of all, authorities, missions, and some other area offices. So if a tribe has received an MOA agreement with IHS for a project, they will see this Public Law 86-121 on the title of the MOA agreement between IHS and the tribe. And it's one of the key authorities of our program. So it actually established the SFC program. It authorized SFC to work with tribes on water, sewer, and solid waste projects. And also it gives the authority or the ability of SFC to enter into agreements with the tribes for these projects. So it was a very key piece for our authority. And next one that's also very important is Public Law 437. And that actually established the SDS list or the authority and the authority and the a direction for SFC program to create the SDS list, to maintain it, and to work with tribes to update it. So those are two really foundational authorities for the SFC program. Within those authorities, we have 8 key missions for our program. And we're not going to talk about all 1 through 8, but in this presentation, we are going to touch on number 1. That is a key mission activity, is to maintain and update the SDS list with the tribes. That is a key component of our mission. I would say number 3, we will touch on that. We can't do all the work ourselves, so we have to partner, say, with EPA on these projects, and of course with the tribes to get them done. Then of course funding, number 4, and then Luke's going to talk on number 5. Once they are funded, it's the design and the construction management of these projects. So as we said in the introduction, Luke, Mark, and I, we're all from the California area IHS. So within IHS, there's 12 different areas. But I would say by and large, the SFC program, you know, we all function and follow the same criteria, the same guidelines. And by and large, SDS should be the same. We all follow the same SDS guidelines. But there are some differences in terms of how we design a project or some unit cost scores. But by and large, all the areas follow under headquarters and these key guidelines for our criteria, our program, and SDS. And of course, there's tribes here from other areas. And if, you know, as we present on things, you know, the best thing to do is to reach out to your local contacts for any kind of specific information on a project or an activity. So I'm going to go into funding, and then after funding, I'll take a quick break if there's any questions on those slides, and then we'll hand it over to Mark. So funding, there's for the SFC program, there's 2 main types of funding. What we call is housing money, and that's for new homes. So if there's a new home, it needs a well, water service line, septic tank, and drain field. That is under the housing program or for housing funds. And the applicant and the homeowner can go to the local IHS office, get an application, and complete that process. And I mention that because that is not in our SDS system. Housing funds, it's a total different system, and it's for new homes, and it's through an application process and not through SDS. What is through SDS, it's called our regular funds, and that is for existing homes. So if there is an existing community of 20, 30, 40 homes, and they have a storage tank that is failing, or it has some deficiencies, that then is reported on SDS for funding, and that is regular funding. The bullet on the bottom, and we'll get into some more detail on this, but also SDS is used for the Jobs Act funding. And we'll talk more about that. So up to 2021, I mean, and even now, of course, you know, we maintain the SDS list of all the deficiencies, water, sewer, and solid waste. And it continued to grow and grow and grow. And the unmet need in 2021 reached $3.5 billion of unmet need for water, sewer, and solid waste nationally. So in 2021, Congress appropriated that much money, $3.5 billion, over a 5-year period. So every year, SFC program would get $700 million, and this is nationally across all the areas, to help bring down those deficiencies by funding projects off of SDS. And that was a huge influx of funding for California and all the areas. It pretty much took our budget and times it by 4 of what we typically got on previous years. So I guess one key takeaway here is not only that, you know, there was a lot of money in the Jobs Act, it's over a 5-year period, but the key thing, of course, is that is funded off of the SDS list. So not only regular funds for existing homes, but the Jobs Act funding is also off of SDS. Some more details about the Jobs Act and how it relates to SDS is that if you are working with your local IHS office on needs and you're looking at the SDS list or projects, one of the key components of this, of the Jobs Act money, is that because Congress funded it in 2021, a project had to be on that list at that time to qualify for the Jobs Act funding. So if it was put on in 2019 and 20, and they took the snapshot in 21, it could qualify for Jobs Act funding. But after that, if you're working with a local IHS engineers and you're continually doing the annual updates and that need gets put on SDS in 22 or 23, it can qualify for funding, but it's regular funding and not Jobs Act funding. So there was some confusion at the beginning of what would qualify and what would not, but that is a very key distinction in what qualifies and what does not. So once again, it might be on SDS, which is good, but if it was not on the 2021 snapshot, then it would not qualify for Jobs Act funding. This is the last slide, and then we'll stop. If there's any questions, then we'll get over to Mark on the actual SDS system. But once again, there's some key takeaways here. SDS is very, very important to report the needs, water, sewer, solid waste, and then it can qualify for regular funds and for Jobs Act funds. And it's for existing homes, typically for community systems. The other key takeaway is we coordinate with EPA on an annual basis, because the projects for sewer improvements that are on SDS, then they qualify for EPA Clean Water Indian Set-Aside funds. So if a tribe has a sewer-related need, we definitely highly encourage that need is on SDS, because once SDS is finalized, then we start to coordinate with EPA of which sewer projects to fund. And EPA will look on SDS to see if it's on there. So we'll take a quick pause here. If there's any questions, then we'll transition really into the actual SDS system itself. If there's any questions about funding, or if you want to save your question for SDS, sir?
Two questions. One is for water projects that then qualify for EPA's set aside. If they're highly ranked in SDS, do they come off SDS? And then ones underneath that would bump up? That's question one. So does it free up IHS funding for other related projects? And I'm asking specifically because I'm interested in solid waste projects, which tend to be ranked far lower than most water and wastewater. And my other question around the Jobs Act, was there an ability or have you seen an opportunity for some of those solid waste related deficiencies to get addressed with that influx of new funding?
Yeah, those good questions. So the first question is, right, a sewer project or wastewater project is on SDS. So if we coordinate with EPA and say we decide that will be funded by EPA Clean Water Act funds, you're right, that in a sense is taken off the list because we know it's going to receive EPA funds. So then if we have, X amount of IHS funds, then in a sense we skip that project because we know it's funded by EPA and we can work further down on that list. Does the influx of Jobs Act money help out solid waste projects? So for years and years, typically just because, of the SDS scoring system, and Mark will get into a little bit of this, but typically water and sewer projects, just because of the health deficiency and health impacts, they kind of tended to be up toward the top of the list. So those were the funds that were used to fund those projects up in the top of the list. But with Jobs Act, we have funded, I want to say 3 solid waste projects with Jobs Act money. So we have done that. And I forgot where they were on the list, but they were lower. And probably if we had not received Jobs Act, we would not have funded those solid waste projects. Oh, sorry, sir? Okay. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a question on the FFC program. You indicated that there's an application to be filled out for that, correct? On the slide, and if so, what's the criteria for that?
Right. So for actually, in terms of an application, I'm just going to go back to that one slide quickly. Right there. Right. And really, the application really only applies to the housing funds. So if that is for an applicant who has a new home to a site and they need water and sewer, then they would go to their local IHS office and there's a standard application form, their name, where they live, what's the proposed facilities, it's endorsed by the tribe. There's a lot of other details in terms of getting environmental and site, has to be site control for that site. But really that is the only, I'll say, application relates to housing for an individual home. For SDS and our annual updates, there's no application for that. It's just really the tribe working, I'll say, with the local IHS office. It could be any part of the year, but typically the busy times are like March, April, May, June. And a tribe works with the engineer on a project, and then that gets inputted into SDS. I mean, there's more work to it, but there's really no application process.
Yeah, and that's understood on the SDS,
Yeah.
but just on the SDS side of things, I was just wondering, so that's on the individual to go to you and apply it that way, and then on that, is there a income limitation on that, or is it
No.
open to everybody? Because I know with certain other programs, like with HUD and the housing and stuff like that, there's an income requirement that you have to be low income to get services. So just wondering if that's the same case with the IHS program under that.
Right, that's a good question. No, for if there's an Indian applicant for water and sewer for their individual home, new home, there's no questions about income. No.
So it's not so much a question, but more
for people in the room about this program here. At where we're at from the San Pasqual Reservation, we use this a lot. Like, I think I've been told in Southern California, we're probably the #1 tribe in terms of applicants each year. Hence why we're moving away from septic systems to a wastewater treatment plant. One thing I'll say about what's really nice about this program, and if your tribe utilizes it, is we took the next step and went force account with Indian Health Service on this. And now our tribal public works department and water department installs the septics and water services to each one of our residential homes. That tends to speed up the process a little bit because the contractor you're gonna be on their schedule and their time. And the contractor in our area might have several tribes that they're contracted to do this with. So we might, be the first home on the reservation, but we're 2 homes behind Santa Isabel and 2 homes behind Rincon and 2 behind La Jolla. So we're actually 7th in line. So if you're trying to get your people in there quickly, I would highly do the force account if you have that capability. Also, it's nice because when things go wrong, they're generally going to call you when they have a water break or a septic issue. And if we didn't install it, then, there's only so much we can do. So that way, if you're installing it yourself, you know where the line is located, you know what materials were used, and you can probably get in there and fix them a little bit faster with that. And so that's what I would say about this program. It's a very easy program to run. So if you don't use it, you really should be.
It's a good point. Thanks, John. Okay, I think we'll if there's any other questions at the end, of course, we can go over them, or we can, if we don't have time, we can go out in the hallway too and discuss them then too. So, but we'll continue with Mark on SDS.
So SDS is the Sanitation Deficiency System. It is a web-based database for tracking deficiencies in water, wastewater, and solid waste projects. These are for existing homes, American Indian and Alaska Native homes, not for future forecasted of homes. It also lists the actual conditions of the deficiency of like water main breaks and stuff. It doesn't forecast future breaks or something. This list is updated annually. So somewhere around January, February timeframe, the local SFC office should be contacting the tribes via either a letter or phone calls or emails or a combination of all 3. Generally, the letter goes to the chairperson and is hopeful that the water operators or the water master or the environmental departments or tribal utility office, whatever kind of is that major partnership that we have with the tribes, receives that as well. I know some people will email it separately after it's been formally mailed, but they'll work on it between April and July. This constitutes kind of having meetings, field visits, and collecting data. All this data is and information is compiled into this list, scored, and it is then submitted by August 1st to our headquarters. And then headquarters looks at it and reviews it and kind of go back and forth until it's submitted within our budget on the request to Congress. Again, this annual update, it allows the SFC program to add new projects to the list. Also modify existing ones that have been that didn't get funded from the past, and then also, of course, remove projects that have been funded or have no longer exist anymore. So that maybe there was I guess the funding would be part of it, but they were funded maybe by a different agency, or the tribe had taken on this repair themselves. Annually, the SDS listing is reported to Congress, and it officially documents all the known sanitation needs that affect communities for American Indians, Alaska Natives. With that, we receive our regular and IIJA funds typically, mid-year the next year. And it's sorry. And then after that project is funded in SDS, IHS does coordinate with the tribes on getting the project documents and the memorandum of agreement signed. And this then leads to the planning, the design activities, and the construction. So typical SDS projects are water, wastewater, and solid waste. The water projects go for, can be community or individual homes. You mentioned about the individual homes with the applications. And so if it's a home that it's been there for a while and it has maybe a failing drain field, we suggest to have them fill out the application so that we have that documentation on file from the tribe that helps kind of put that listing together for individual systems. And again, you can, even if it's for SDS, you can get the applications from the local SFC office. And then some tribes have them constantly, the actual paper copies, but you can download them off the internet too. So it's the type of projects are for water supply issues or storage capacity issues. Maybe it's distribution, either pressure or lack of pressure or constant documented water main breaks as well. And then for sewer, again, it's projects that are community or individual homes. And these are typical ones are like collection issues for community sewers. Maybe it's a disposal issue or a pumping lift station that's constantly failing or needs to be upgraded. And then of course for individual systems, septic tank drain fields as well. Solid waste is a little bit different. These projects are for the infrastructure, and they're generally the transfer stations in the open dump closures. So all these deficiencies, again, I can't kind of repeat it a few times on here, and I think I'll probably repeat it a couple more, is these are for existing homes, not future homes, and they're existing conditions that are occurring, not future forecast. So there are a few items to consider when putting together this list. And one of them is, and the biggest probably thing is documentation. Documentation is the key. And if we don't have the right information to show headquarters, show people who aren't physically out there or aren't here, it'll lower the scoring or lower the ability to be funded. And so these are, records, could be photos, could be tests, letters from regulations, that sort of thing. And those document the deficiency and the health impact for the project. And I'll go over what those are in a few minutes, but again, strong documentation is needed though. These documents should be clear, representative, and quantitative. So if someone is complaining about, for example, experiencing low pressure on a water line or when they turn on the faucet, they're experiencing low pressure. What's low to one person may not be another. Low in our listing is anything that's under 20 PSI. And so I always bring that example up. I did one years ago for a community experience. They complained about experiences of low pressure, went out there, put a pressure recorder, and the first measurement was 90 PSI, which is above your suggested. And then at night, it would dip down to 50. So while they experienced a 40 plus drop, which that's why it felt low, but that still is a pretty high PSI. So again, that's my example of, reliving there. So on the documentation, we want to coordinate with the tribal utility office or the environmental departments, the water operators, the water departments. The water operators, I always found, are probably the best. The people have the best knowledge of what's going on. Sometimes they're a little scared to say something, especially if it's their boss is standing there, because it sounds like they're doing something wrong maybe on it. And really, we're not going and calling the newspaper. Well, I don't know if newspapers exist, but news or anything. We're not posting on the internet. It's to help get funding to be able to improve the water systems and wastewater systems. And you meet with them enough, people get comfortable having that relationship, and you do find different issues that you may have not have experienced before or seen before. You're out talking at the water tank, realizing what's this hitting me, and it's like the tank is spitting water once it gets 2/3 full, and you find out that it's always been leaking like that, and they never filled it up to the top because it always leaked. And it was leaking significantly. This is again another example from being out in the field on there. And again, a few years later, they're looking at a brand new tank, because we worked on this project actually with EPA on a partnership for a set aside, and I think it was tribal border infrastructure on that one when I was down south. Sometimes we do fund what's called planning projects. Planning projects are ones that maybe it needs a little bit more testing, a little bit more information to boost it to that fundable level. We don't want to fund projects and then say, now what? And so these planning projects help kind of get it over that hump. Maybe go conduct a hydrogeologic study to find the optimum site to drill a water well. Or maybe it's to conduct, special environmental studies that maybe it's a little sensitive on cultural resources or threatened and endangered species, or maybe it's floodplain analysis. That's kind of been the bigger issue here, is on floodplains, and a lot of those have been funded over the past few years, and we're constantly moving those forward. And once they get the planning done, it'll boost them into a ready to fund consideration on our list. We also want to start early on this. So just because it hasn't been initiated officially from IHS, we also want to encourage tribes to talk to IHS about any deficiency that they would know on the systems too. And then the earlier we know, the more time it would give for both parties to prepare a good project or good listing and documentation for it, and collect that data. And of course, this gives us ample time for site reviews, being out in the field, looking at it, kind of going back and forth if needs be. Meetings take time. Meet a few times, go over some of the things. Maybe it's rifling through our old as-built, or the tribe has old records too, looking at some of the locations of the valves or something. And the third one is to strategize use of tribal priority points, and that is one of the scoring mechanisms that's on a project, is to use the tribal priority points. And I'll describe that in a few minutes. But this is basically the documentation. We need some sort of either a letter from the tribe or a response from an email coming back that says, yes, this is what our ranking of the projects are, just so it shows that we consulted with the tribes and the tribes are aware that these projects are in our list. We want to prioritize the level of effort. So a well-developed SDS project does take a lot of time and effort to go through. Again, like I mentioned about documentation, reports, and then of course getting an accurate cost estimate, having meetings, site visits, that sort of thing. And we want to document all the needs, but sometimes we do, if time is a crunch on it, or if we're looking at prioritizing which ones do we focus. It's the higher level, the 3 and the 4 deficiency levels. So we want to prioritize the more deficient that project is, or the more impact it has. Some projects and communities have homes that are non-American Indian or Alaska Native homes, or they have non-residential units, or a mixture of both. And so IHS regular funds cannot fund these homes. So on a pro rata share, we would have to have some sort of mechanism that would pay for those costs. And so some of those non-residential units are, tribal offices, restaurants, gas station, schools, church, casinos, Sometimes casinos are on their own water system too. But we would need some sort of mechanism, and if it would usually we ask for either a letter that says, yeah, we'll go after additional funds to cover, X amount of dollars that are that we'd actually already tell you what the amount would be we'd need, but we'd have a documentation that would state that for it. In 2019, the SDS guidelines were revised, and so some things changed a little. The wording changed, so it was a little bit less cumbersome, I guess, on there. The scoring focused more on the deficiency levels versus the cost. The USP cost was a major limiting factor, and that was where the chunk of points were on a project. Now the chunk of points still lay in health impact, but the deficiency level points have increased to account for the 3s and the 4s. This is an example of one of the SDS narratives that are in our web-based program called STARS, Sanitation Tracking and Reporting System. This is a very old-looking one. We need a new slide on here because I think it was from 2008, but it's been updated a few times. But what you see here, I think there's which one's the point? Is the red on here? Which one is the red? Okay. Okay. So up on the top, it gives just the title, the name. It gives what the score is of the project, and gives the engineer who input it and updated. The deficiency level is here. It's always going to be a final of 1 because that's the lowest point. And we always want to go from the top and make sure it gets fixed. And so this one has a deficiency level of 3 and a health impact score here as 15. A deficiency as the points, those have been changed a little bit. And there's a previous service, capital cost per home, the operation and maintenance capability, and then contributions for eligible homes that are not IHS funds. And then the tribal priority points are right here. This shows this was the #1 priority for the tribe. And then other considerations are usually goes down to a negative. The reason why you would have a negative points on it is to maybe it's a phased project and it's phase 3 and phase 2 hasn't been built yet. Well, you don't want to fund phase 3 with phase 2 not being funded, and that scores a little bit below it. So you would put the negative points in phase 3, so phase 2 would be above. These are the homes here and the types of homes. Looks like there's some HUD homes that were in there, so it would be an eligible cost. But there's mostly 90, I guess, homes of regular homes there. And then, of course, the costs are on this line. The bottom is the description of what the deficiency is on the project and what the solution is going to be. And it's usually pretty brief. It's one of those things that you look at it and in just probably 30 seconds, you know what the issue is and what the solution is going to be. So the breakdown of the points that I just talked about, there's 8 categories of them. There's health impact, deficiency level, previous service, capital cost, the cost per home, local tribal priority points. There's the O&M operation maintenance capability, the contributions with the asterisks. Again, that's for eligible homes. That's not the ineligible shares. Those aren't points on there. And then, of course, the other considerations. So the health impact ranges from 0 to 30. 0 meaning maybe there's just the potential for someone getting sick, to 30 meaning people are actually getting sick from it. And so the higher the points on there, obviously, is the more closer to someone getting sick from the issue. The deficiency level, those point allocations go from either a 1, which is more basically like a routine, gate valve needs to be fixed because it doesn't work anymore, to 4 or 5 means that 4 means there's no piped water or sewer to the home. 5 means there's no piped sewer and no piped water at the home. Those are more rare. I don't think we have any in California that I know of. Previous service is if the home has received federal funds in the past. And so on an individual home, on an individual project, if the home has not received federal funds for it, either being built or for any sort of other needs for it, it would get 4 points. If it had, it would be 0. On a community project, that's where it ranges into the percent. So if half the homes have received federal funds and half of them hadn't, it would be in between that, so it'd be 2 points. You distribute the points, by 25%. The capital cost score ranges from -9 to 9 points, 9 being that it's a really low amount per home. It's probably either a lot of homes and a low construction cost, to -9, meaning that it's ranged on what we would call the economically infeasible. Over the years, it used to be that if something hit the -9 points, it was pretty much going to be stagnant. Rise of IIJA funds has helped out some of these projects that are at least the legacy ones to help get them funded, because they were on that snapshot from the 21. Local tribal priority points is out of 16. So the tribe gets to pick and rank 4 projects out of whatever listing they have to apply priority points. We suggest that they apply the highest points to the project that has the most potential to get funded. So I see them through emails that say these are the ranking of the projects and their scores that we have in SCS. This is what we would put in for the tribal priorities. Do you agree? And that's where that comes from. And so again, it doesn't make sense to put your top priority on one that scores the lowest, because that means that you're really hurting all your projects getting potentially funded. The O&M, operation maintenance capability, that is in Luke's department there. His crew goes out and they work with the utility offices, and they do a pretty comprehensive review on the operation and maintenance. And it basically goes through all these different questions, like if there are as-built, is there PPE, is there this for it. And so that's where that score, and I think the average one I usually see is like 12 or 11 that's in there. Contributions are for eligible homes. That's 0 to 8, 8 being that 50% of the funding is outside sources for eligible homes. Anything higher than that, it's still 8 points. And then, of course, no contributions is 0, and it has some ranges on there in between it. And then again, like I talked about, other considerations, it goes from 0 to -15. The only time that applies was if we have to do it, because either maybe it's lacking some information there, still a top project, or it's a phased project. Which brings into the new guidelines did add in the tier system. Tier 1 is the project is ready to fund. It contains like everything in there that you'll see on the next slide or a couple slides later. But it is used for calculation of the IIJA funds that are allotted to the area. We do not fund planning projects on tier 1 projects, because it should be already ready to fund for the whole construction. And if there's planning activities, usually they're routine, pretty easy environmental. Maybe it's an easier geotech, because we're going to put a tank next to an existing tank already, so we know it's there. Tier 2 is not part used for the calculations of the areas IIJA funding allotment. It's what's called engineering assessed. So it's just it's almost there, but it's maybe lacking some information that we need. This is what our planning funds would use. So like I mentioned about a hydrogeologic study to locate the optimum place to drill a water well, especially if we don't know the area. And so this would give the idea of, hey, this is where you drill, then you come back and can more successfully drill a water well. It's not guaranteed, but it at least boosts the confidence on there. Excuse me, and the risk impact on it. Tier 3 is like Tier 2. It is not used for the allotment. It can be funded for planning projects, but it's called preliminary assessed, meaning that it's kind of there as a placeholder, or maybe it's it's not ready to fund because there's a right-of-way issue or land, or land status issue for it. So this is STARS. This is on the page, and this shows the drop down of the tiers, and it just basically shows. So we update this every year. So some projects that maybe in the past were tier 2, if we were able to complete that planning project and get them up, or do some other research and get that up to a tier 1, we would, select the little drop down there for it. So tier 1 project requirements require 7 things out of them. One is it's a well-scoped, detailed investigation on the project. The deficiency is well documented and has a feasible solution. The cost estimate is detailed and it is current. Sometimes there's cost estimates that from a few years ago that we have to update those every year. Especially with inflation over the past few years has skyrocketed, and so it's more accurate. External funding, as I mentioned, for ineligible homes or non-residential units has been identified and documented, meaning we've received a letter or some sort of information from the tribe stating that they'll cover those costs. The preliminary design of the key systems, we know the alignment, the size of the water main, the location of the water well, or the location of the sewage lagoon. Sufficient planning has been also done to determine and mitigate any risks. Those would be, again, like the water well drilling. We know where we're going to drill, so it kind of lowers that, but it's more of the environmental issues. If there was a major environmental issue going on that we had for floodplains, or for land status, that's usually a holdup on those risks there. And of course, the last thing is a PER, completed preliminary engineering report. If it doesn't meet those, it's going to be a 2 or a 3. So the project goes through that system. We get our allocations of funds. The project is listed as a funded project. Now what? Now what do we do? So it actually goes into, it's taken off that list, gets placed into our project data system, and it's either funded with regular funds or IIJA funds if it's a legacy project. And so IHS will begin to coordinate with the tribes, write up the project documents, the project summary and the memorandum of agreement, and then move forward. Without a signed memorandum of agreement, we cannot spend money on the project yet. So it's always important to get those things done early and move those into tribal council so that they can sign it and not delay on it. And then of course, the project development goes into environmental, which can sometimes be a lengthy process because you've got a lot of different agencies, a lot of different players in that, including the State Historic Preservation Office, or if the tribe is a TIPO, going through it, working with them, working with Fish and Wildlife if there's risks involved with them. They take a few months also. And then of course, design and construction. And Luke will talk about that part of the phase of it. Do you guys have any questions, any concerns, thoughts?
I'm just curious, how would it work if they, Hi, I'm Ashley Pomona, Norfolk Rancheria, and I'm just curious how an applicant would go about applying for IHS services if they aren't within the tribe. I mean, if they're a tribal member, but they're not eligible with the tribe?
So are you, like, if they're in an area where that's not where, like, their tribe?
Like if they're a
if they're-
tribal citizen, but they're not an active tribal citizen, say, due to, I don't know, certain situations or certain reasons why they're not an active citizen and receiving tribal benefits, would they still be eligible to receive IHS services?
So actually, that's the one that kind of comes up every once in a while. So the example that I was always told my old director was, if the individual could receive health care benefits at the health center, then they're eligible for our services. And so they would apply the same methodology through the application, and they would still need the local tribe to sponsor them through a memorandum of agreement there. Mhm. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We're running a little short on time, so I'm going to sort of speed talk through a little bit of this. Okay, so to start with, I'm just going to talk a little bit about project delivery, and then some of the obstacles that we sort of face in that, and then some of the things that we're trying to do to sort of reorganize to try and overcome some of those obstacles. So to start with, there's the memorandum of agreement. I just want to sort of discuss a little bit real quick about the importance of that and getting that signed timely. For the most part, that happens. But really, that is sort of the start pistol for us. It allows us to expend funds and to award contracts for us to get some of the design requirements that we need or design information that we need in order to move forward with design. So then we typically we can move quickly into surveying. That's basically a base map of the area and the project site. Environmental compliance follows. That's a bit of a, there's quite a bit of time required for that. A lot of that has to be done first before we can really move into design. We can, as a parallel sort of activity with environmental compliance, we can do additional, some testing, water quality, things like that. But soils has to follow NEPA. We can't do any ground disturbance until NEPA's completed. Then we have, then we move into design once we have kind of the information that we need. Then we complete our drawings and specifications. Then we also help the tribe solicit and also with sort of evaluating the proposals that come back, and then help the tribe with a recommendation for award. And then we follow up with construction, administration, and inspection during construction. And then we also follow up with O&M after construction. So, and these are just some, we'll just sort of skip through these. These are just sort of example plan sets. Okay, so some of our challenges. Occasionally we do have, we have to get easements or rights of way if we're in county areas. That's not too frequent, but sometimes that does slow things down. The environmental clearances, those are rather, they can be, like I mentioned earlier, quite cumbersome time-wise. We have to write the scope of work. We have to then put it out to bid. This is particularly if there isn't a TIPO. And so then we have to review the proposals, award the contract. And sometimes we're at the contractors have schedules and they may have previous work. And so there's delays there to get in on their schedule. Then we have to review their work. And so it can take at a minimum even 6 months, 7 months for to kind of meet the NEPA requirements. And if there's any coordination that has to occur with outside agencies, whether it's Fish and Wildlife, those can also add to the timelines. And then sometimes it's complicated to find qualified contractors. Sometimes the bids come in kind of exorbitant and we have to kind of re-solicit it. Then if that is unsuccessful, then we have to sort of work with insufficient funds sort of situation where we have to go back and find additional funds or cut scope. And then we also have staffing fluctuations like most agencies. And okay, so those are the majority of our sort of obstacles that we have. And then some of the things that we're doing to overcome that is we're constantly hiring new staff. That's sort of an ongoing issue. There's always transfers or retirements. But we have gotten 10 additional engineers and technicians, so that should help us speed up our project durations. We also have 4 area engineer consultants that are kind of dedicated to the technical aspects of the job so that we can kind of move the designs through a little bit more quickly. And then we're also using outside engineering firms for some of the projects that are kind of well suited to hand off directly to them. That's the scope of work is pretty finite, and we already have a very good idea of what we're going to do. So that's pretty much everything. Any questions?
Just on that just to mention on that last slide, just for the California area, I think it's pretty hard to read, but that's the website. And for the California area, you can locate all the field offices in the state if you do want to contact an individual office. I'm not sure how much time we have, but we can answer. We're through, okay. But if you have any questions, we're here, and you can come on up and we can discuss any projects or anything you want to talk about. Thank you.